Welcome to the Creative Coast lunch session. I was very pleased when Jen, who is the executive director of the Creative Coast, said to me, well, you know, Miriam, I'm also half of my time devoted to CETA, and I have a CETA event at exactly the same time. Would you please moderate the session? I said I would be delighted to do so. I'm a vice president of the board of the Creative Coast. I've been involved with the Creative Coast for many, many years, and I have other endeavors, but I won't introduce those right now. I would like to let you know that the Creative Coast is a nonprofit that has been focused on catalyzing the creative and technology and entrepreneurial ecosystem in Savannah for over 20 years. During this current crisis, we've moved everything online for free, and we're thrilled that you have joined us today. We are also thrilled that Tricia Veldman, who is a speech expert, is here today to talk with us about how to present ourselves better, both visually and voice-wise online. I believe that it's going to be something that's here to stay, not just during the pandemic and until such time that people feel safe going in place to meetings. But I think that there are going to be hybrid meetings for a long time to come, where we offer in-place meeting and also the ability to come in on Zoom or some other platform. So without further ado, just a quick welcome to our guests: Susan McGahey, Pamela Cummings, Kelly Anderson, Sherry Reed, Adrienne Green, hi Adrienne, Ashley Dubois, Drew Dixon, Mark Brummer, hi Mark, Eric Reagan, and Sandy Metzel. We've got a great crew here. We are recording, so those who couldn't make it, you can pick up a recording or listen and watch the recording on the Creative Coast site not too long after we finish here. So may I introduce Tricia Veldman, who is the proprietress of Georgia Speech Coaching, and ask her to introduce herself to all of you and embark on her presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you all for joining me today on this rainy Tuesday at lunchtime. I am, as Miriam said, the head of Georgia Speech Coaching. So I work with clients individually as well as in groups, workshops. Right now, all of those are remote workshops, but they still work on all things related to speech, voice, and communication. So I teach a lot of public speaking voice enhancement, which is for anyone who doesn't love the sound of their speaking voice, as well as accent modification and more traditional speech language therapy. Given that my specialty is all around voice and speech, I almost never use slides in my presentations because so much is dependent on our voice and the presence in the room. Since we don't have that presence in the room, I did put together some slides for you all today so that you don't have to just watch my face for the next hour. So I may need some advice on the best way to do this, but I believe if I just share my screen and start the slideshow, we'll all be fine, right? Okay, so let's try this. Okay, great. So today we'll talk about some practices for remote meetings and presentations. Hopefully a lot of this you can apply to your in-person sessions as well. Now, I typically only do interactive sessions and workshops because everything that we talk about is best understood with practice. That being said, I will not force anyone to participate. You are here on a voluntary basis. We won't do anything scary, hopefully, but I encourage you to get out of your comfort zone. If something does feel intimidating, volunteer, but for the most part, it will just be me talking. That said, feel free to stop me along the way. We will definitely have time for questions at the end, but if you're feeling as we go along that you have an urgent question, either type it in the chat, and if I don't see it pop up, someone can flag me down and I'll stop, or unmute yourself and ask your question. I'm totally happy to change things as we go. All right. Uh-oh. How do I go to the next slide? Okay, so first and foremost, we need to reconnect with our purpose behind why we are in a remote meeting or giving a presentation. Again, this isn't exclusive to remote meetings. Anytime we are in a situation communicating with another person, it's always helpful to stop and reassess our purpose being there. It can feel very draining, especially these days, going from one meeting to the next, all on the computer. It takes a lot out of us. We get antsy being home all day. So what's particularly helpful is you always want to reconnect with your mission and your purpose behind whatever it is that you're about to share. So you want to connect with your audience is the main goal. You want to have the goal of delivering your message authentically and to feel confident and comfortable while you're doing so. A key element here is we never want our delivery to be distracting to the audience. If the audience is so fascinated by the ums that we are using, or by how quickly we are talking, or by the poor connection speed, or by the distractions in the background, all of those variables will take away from their ability to really hear our message. So everything we talk about today is meant to position us in such a way that we can most authentically and effectively deliver our message so that it is well received by the audience. So first you want to prepare. This comes down to getting ourselves ready for the meeting, getting our software and hardware ready for the meeting, and preparing our environment. Disclaimer before I go into each of these, all of these are optional in the sense that we are in a time right now of massive forgiveness. If you show up in your pajamas with your hair in a mess and you're eating your breakfast as you join the meeting, everyone will forgive you because of the situation that we're all in. It won't lose you points to not have yourself totally ready, to not have your environment perfect, and to not have your equipment functioning optimally. But it will always gain you points if you do have those things in place. Again, all of this is intended to make us feel most confident and comfortable while we are presenting. If we have things distracting our audience, we probably have things distracting ourselves as well. So if we're worried about what is this person thinking about the messy room behind me, it would help our presentation skills and comfort level if we take care of that environment beforehand, which is why preparation comes in handy. So get yourself ready. Pretty straightforward, but this includes things like showering, grooming as you normally would, even if you know that the video quality isn't that great. Maybe people won't be able to tell if you haven't brushed your hair. Do it, not necessarily for how you will come across, but for the way it makes you feel. We cannot perform at the top of our games if we don't feel like we are at our best. Miriam said to me just before we started, she put on pearls today to feel more dressed up, to feel fancier for this meeting or for whatever it is that she had going on today. And that's not nothing. The psychological impact of preparing ourselves and feeling good about ourselves will only set us up for success. Again, no one's judging you for not wearing jewelry to your Zoom meeting, but if it makes you feel better, it's always worth doing. You want to get dressed. I always recommend people think about their bottoms as well, because you don't know if you're going to have to stand up at some point in the meeting. I know frequently when I'm working with individual clients, I do have them stand up and do various exercises. It has happened that people have been wearing pajamas. Of course, no judgment passed, but then they get flustered and that throws off their performance, and that wastes time in our session, them giving me the disclaimer of why they're not wearing pants. And so just save yourself the hassle, and again, make yourself feel better and more in control by putting on a full outfit, as tempting as it may be to keep on your pajamas. Then prior to any meeting, you always want to start with a warm-up. This doesn't need to take a lot of time, but do simple things like stretch. We're sitting for long periods of time right now. We may not be out and about moving our bodies, but when we stretch, we release physical tension, and that all manifests in our voices, and that also obviously affects our anxiety levels. So if we can release some of that tension prior to the meeting, that will set us up for success also. So although I cannot see most of you right now, your videos are turned off, let's all take a moment to stretch. Just wherever you are, stretch your arms side to side, whatever feels good to you. I did this in a group class the other day, and I think we spent at least 5 minutes on it. I won't do that to you all, but as good as it feels, just keep doing it. Listen to your body. Always take a few minutes prior to your meeting or presentation to do a simple stretch or some light physical activity. You also want to warm up your voice. Right now, we don't have body language to the same extent as we would in person, so there's a lot more information being conveyed exclusively through our voices. Facial expression as well, but if it's a setting like this where you're looking at slides and maybe not necessarily seeing the person's face, a lot of that information is coming through their voice. If you're on a phone call, 100% of the information is coming through your voice. So I will walk you all through a vocal warm-up later in today's presentation. As I mentioned, we will be a little more interactive as we go. For now, just know that that's coming. And then also as a warm-up, you want to think through your content, be generally prepared with what you're going to say. That doesn't mean rehearsing your presentation verbatim, but in general, if you have the beginning ready, that will set you up to feel more confident throughout the whole thing. And then of course, you want to try to be early so that you can make sure everything is functioning properly, you know the way that the platform works and all of that. And again, just makes you feel better. You show up late, people will forgive you, but then you might be thrown off, you might be frazzled. That will affect your performance in the whole meeting or presentation. So then, once you're feeling all good, you want to get your environment ready. Again, none of this is mandatory. Do what's comfortable for you, but some things to consider to make yourself feel more comfortable and to provide a pleasant experience for your audience. Think about your background. You can have fun with virtual backgrounds like Miriam and be in downtown Savannah during our meeting. You can go a more neutral route like I've taken. It doesn't matter too much. What matters here is that it's not so distracting that it's difficult for the audience to focus on what you're saying. And bear in mind that even though everyone will be forgiving right now, we naturally will make inferences about you as a person based on what we see behind you. Doesn't mean, again, anyone's being critical or judgmental, but just know we naturally will make those inferences. So depending on what you want to expose about yourself, depending on the vibe that you want for that particular meeting, think about what is behind you. And as I mentioned earlier, if you are distracted by what's behind you, thinking, what are they thinking about this thing? That's going to throw you off as well. So generally, a neutral or professional background or a virtual background are the best options. Lighting, I know that we're all working with the best we've got. No one needs to go invest in professional lighting, but since we will be here for a while, it's worth thinking about positioning yourself in a way that works. Main guideline here is you want to try to avoid being backlit. So if you have the light right behind you, that's going to make you very dark. It will be difficult for the audience to see you. Natural lighting is generally always better, although on days like today, when it's rainy and gloomy outside, you don't have much control over how that will show up. You also want to think about the angle of your computer as this relates to your eye contact. And this also affects the following point, which is posture. If you can position your webcam in a way that is as close to eye level as possible, one, you're going to appear more in control than you would if you were hunched over or looking down or looking way up. And two, that forces you into a nice straight posture, which one is best for your vocal technique, which again, we'll talk about with a little more depth later, but also by sitting up straight, we are sending signals to our bodies and minds that we are feeling good, we are feeling confident. It is hard to feel confident when we are slumped over or when our bodies are telling us that we are stressed or that we are tense. So do yourself a favor, this one simple adjustment of having your webcam as close to eye level as you can for your situation does a lot of good. For me personally, I have a shoebox and a textbook underneath my laptop on a table. So this doesn't need to be anything fancy or professional, but do whatever works for you. And then as far as proximity, you don't want to be so far forward in front of the camera that we only see your face, but you also don't want to be too far back. Most of this is pretty intuitive. We have been in this situation for enough time by now that I think most people have a situation in place that feels comfortable for them. But I'm just pointing these things out in case they haven't crossed your mind, or in case you're wondering, why don't I feel good on my remote presentations when I was feeling fine on those in-person presentations? All of these factors do influence us, even if it's at a subconscious level. So we just want to set ourselves up for best presentations. All right, then we will talk about getting our equipment ready. Won't dwell on this too long because again, we've been here long enough that I assume most of you are familiar with these various platforms. If you do need to use something that you have not had exposure to before, it is worth doing a trial run with your friends or your family, or doing some research to investigate how these various platforms function. Always good to arrive early, test things out, and make sure that you're set up, because we all know how frustrating it is when you think you're all ready and then some technical error starts happening and then you can't even focus on what you were saying or what anyone else is saying in the meeting because you're thinking so hard about your setup. Invest in your connection speed. We will be here probably for quite some time. So if you don't have stable internet, if you're finding that it's constantly choppy, it's worthwhile to put a little extra money in making sure that your internet is strong. And then a simple thing to prevent technical errors, close out of other browsers or windows so that your computer is running smoothly. Okay, so now that we are all prepared for the meeting, let's talk about how to actually execute the meeting or presentation in a remote setting. First rule, treat any remote interaction with the same level of respect that you would in person. This goes back to preparing yourself. You probably wouldn't show up to a meeting without being well-groomed, so do the same for your remote meetings when reasonable. I know things happen and sometimes it's last minute and you don't have time to do all of that. That's fine, but what's important here is the respect that you are giving to the meeting. Same energy and attention that you would have in person, try to have that remotely as well. It is very tempting when we are on our computers to just click the other window and check our emails or pick up our phones and text because they can't see me in the corner of the screen over here. I'm out of view. Doing those things are often more obvious to the listeners than we suspect. So we might think we're being nice and smooth and no one can tell that I'm not really paying attention, but people can tell. And that is harmful to the connection that you are trying to establish and to the information and the message that you're trying to convey or that you need to be receiving. If you wouldn't check your emails during an in-person meeting with this same person or group of people, don't do that during a remote meeting. Don't eat your snacks during a meeting if that's not something that you would feel comfortable doing in person. Again, there's some leeway here, but all of this are just things to keep in mind for making yourself feel best and for letting the meeting run more smoothly. If everyone is zoned out checking their emails, then when the boss asks a question, everyone's going to need the information repeated, and then you're going to be in the meeting for a lot longer. Let's make this more efficient for everyone by trying to stay as attentive as possible, and that comes down to treating the meeting with respect. And the when in your control piece has to do with the fact that I know we have a lot of things going on at our homes that we wouldn't necessarily have if we were in a boardroom. We can't help it if our child runs into the meeting during the presentation. We are going to talk about how to handle situations like that in our relationship to distractions. But first thing is, when it's in your control, treat the meeting just as you would in person, give it the same level of respect, and remember, you are still connecting with other human beings. It can feel easy to think that this is just a computer, this is just an electronic device, but it's not. There are people on the other end watching you and listening to you and talking to you, and they want your respect just as you'd expect it from them. One terribly tricky thing about all of this is that with these remote meetings, we don't have as much feedback from our listeners that we do in person. It is challenging for me right now talking to a screen and not seeing your reactions. Many of you don't have your videos on, and even if you do, I only see a few of you in the corner and I'm trying to focus more on my slides. But one thing I thrive on as a coach when I'm in person is the feedback from the audience. I use that to gauge their level of satisfaction. Do I need to be funnier here? Do I need to take things slower? It is a lot harder, objectively speaking, to measure how your listeners are responding when you literally can't see them, or when everyone is on mute and you can't hear them. You can't hear them laughing or sighing in agreement with the frustrating point you made or whatever it is. So what I will say is assume that they like you. You won't know otherwise, so do what you can. Just assume you're doing a great job. If you're not, you will find out later. But if you go through the presentation assuming everyone's bored, they hate this, I can't see them, I'm just assuming that this is terrible and I'm just gonna rush through this and get it over with, that's not productive for anyone involved, and that's likely not the case. We can also do our part as listeners. If you are on a remote meeting, try to smile every once in a while to show the speaker, hey, I hear you, I'm still with you. I know you're talking to a box and it feels weird, but I am still a human on the other end of the screen. Not saying you all need to do that today. I'm assuming you all love me, but in moving forward, especially when you're working on team building with your company or you're connecting and trying to network with other people virtually, do your part as a listener and remember how helpful that is for the speaker. But when you're the speaker, again, there is no sense in thinking that you're doing a bad job. And this goes for in-person as well. Sometimes we'll be giving a presentation in person and we'll think everybody hates this because no one's smiling at me. I've heard that so many times, but often they're not smiling because they're taking in what you're saying. They're really trying to absorb and digest your message. And that person who looked the grumpiest will be the one that raised their hand and said, I enjoyed that more than you know. So even in person and you don't have the feedback you necessarily are expecting, it's always better to assume that you're doing well because that will set you up in a more positive space. So then a tenet to remote meetings is leadership. We know it can get very awkward on a group call when someone asks a question and then no one responds. I'm seeing something in the chat. Oh, that's not a question. Anyway, so you're on the group meeting and no one speaks up, and then all of a sudden everyone chimes in at the same time. That happens, and then it's like a stop and go awkward sidewalk dance in the middle of the meeting. This all comes down to leadership. If one person speaks up during that really lengthy, awkward pause, the meeting will run more efficiently. If every time we have that long pause, one person says something, then we won't have any more awkward pauses. And if you do speak over someone, that's where leadership comes into play too. It happens all the time where two people talk at once. It's inevitable. But if one person needs to take the reins and say, you go ahead, or I'm going to finish my point. Usually it's more polite to say, you go ahead. So you want to give the other person a chance. But if it's this, and everyone's trying to talk at the same time, it wastes a lot of time in the meeting and everyone feels less comfortable. So you can think about how you can be the leader in your remote meeting by being the person who speaks up first. Do I have a volunteer? If you would like to volunteer, unmute yourself and say something, please, because I cannot see all of your faces.
I'll volunteer. This is Ashley.
Okay, thank you, Ashley, for volunteering. That was the exercise. You don't have to do anything. I appreciate you chiming in, but now we can all think of Ashley as the leader in this group. She was the first person to volunteer, the first person to speak up and say, I'll do it, even if maybe she doesn't feel like doing it, even if she has no idea what I'm going to ask her to do. But did you see how long it took for someone to volunteer? Just took up time from the presentation. Had Ashley said, I'll do it, first thing, that would have saved us time. No insult to you, Ashley. I very much appreciate you volunteering. And that makes everyone else in the group look to you as the leader. You are the most confident person who volunteered first. If we were all stuck on a desert island together, we would look to you, Ashley, to lead the way. So when this feels challenging, when we think, but I don't like speaking up in meetings, or I don't want to be the first to volunteer, I don't know what she's going to have me do, consider your values. How do you want people to think of you after connecting with you, after having a conversation with you, after hearing your presentation? We all now look at Ashley with admiration. wow, good for her. Wish I could have been that brave. We never look down at the person who volunteers first. So when you think about your own speech values, do you want to be confident? Do you want to be seen as charismatic? Do you want to be seen as timid? Do you want to be bubbly, engaging, charming, whatever it is? Think of these words for yourself, because I can't tell you, and it's not my job as a speech coach to tell you how to speak. It is my job to help you figure out what your speech values are, how you want to come across, and then what I do with my clients is we work on ways to get them there. So think for yourself. Write down the 3 key things that you would like for people to think and feel about you after interacting with you, because that will inform all of your decisions. If you tend to be the very timid person in the meeting who never speaks up, totally fine. But if you realize, oh wow, I actually want to be seen as a leader, your behaviors need to be reflective of that. And sometimes it's really just a matter of making that connection and saying, I do want to be a leader, so I'm going to do it. But if you've never stopped to consider what your values are, it's very difficult to make that adjustment in the moment. If you're not used to speaking up, why should you suddenly do it? This is where thinking about your values can be very, very helpful. So thank you again, Ashley, leader of the group. We talked about interrupting. If someone else talks at the same time as you, or if you accidentally interrupt someone, try to handle it with grace and just take control of the situation. I apologize for interrupting. Try to wait a few seconds to make sure the other person has finished talking. There usually is a lag of some sort when using technology. Okay, so then we can, as we're listening, engage in active listening. So this means physically minimize your distractions. Like we said, close other browsers and windows. If your phone is tempting for you, if you see a text when you're in a meeting and it's really hard for you to not read it or not respond, put it away. Put it someplace where you won't even get the notification while you're on the call. Generally, if you have a clean space around you, that will limit distractions in your periphery. And again, attend the speaker as you would in person. Some general tips for active listening that I always advocate, remote or in person, but that happen to be particularly easy during remote meetings. If you're the type of person who, when something pops in your head, it is very difficult to focus on what the speaker is saying, which many people are. It is difficult to really take in what someone else is saying if our minds are thinking about something else and thinking about what we want to say next. One very helpful tool, physically write it down. Write 1 or 2 keywords so that you remember your point. Again, this is where the remote setup is particularly helpful. They can't see you jotting it down. They might notice you're distracted for a second, but that is going to help you be a better listener and you can come back to that point. In person, you can do that. You can also try to get in the habit of making a mental note so that you are fully attentive to the speaker. Eye contact is tricky with screens. It's difficult to look at the camera itself when other people's faces are below the camera. So you want to make sure you're doing a combination of the two. Some of the time you are looking at the person's face to pick up on their cues, but other times you want to make sure you're looking more directly towards the camera. Nod along to show affirmation, ask questions. Recast information just means if someone's explained something and you do have questions or you want to make sure you're on the same page, repeat it back to them to show that you are listening. And if you get something wrong, that's an opportunity for them to clarify what they meant. Relationship to distractions. So we know that distractions are going to happen. It is better to let your group know what you're dealing with. If you have 7 kids in the house at the time of your meeting, tell the people you are about to speak with, hey guys, I got a lot of kids running around. If they come in, I'm gonna say, hold on for a moment and address my child. that will be much more efficient in the flow of the meeting than if every time a child runs in, you just turn to them and start talking and kind of forget about the person in front of you. By making that remark and giving the key word that says, hey, I'm occupied right now, you are now giving the listener permission to check their phone or check their email or do what they need to do for a moment, as opposed to sitting there waiting for you to stop talking to your child. We're all understanding that distractions are going to happen. This is not to say they won't, but if we have a healthy relationship to the distractions and let people know, hey, I'm not really listening to you right now because I just got a really important email that I have to respond to, that is so much more respectful and considerate than just trying to type away at the email and pretending that you're interested in what they're saying. Okay, so I know we are running out of time, so we're going to start to get into some of the voice work I mentioned. Your voice is affected by many things: posture, breath, physical tension, hydration, confidence. Two-way street just means that when we are not feeling confident, often we can hear that in our voices. But if we are not feeling confident and we know how to use our voices in a healthy and efficient way that sounds like we are confident, we can actually trick ourselves into feeling like we've got this. Learning to trust your voice, even when you're nervous, is one of the most liberating experiences. Not something we have time to fully get into today, but what we will do are some vocal warm-ups to make sure that your voice is in a healthy place when you start your meeting. So what I would like for all of you to do is put one hand on your belly and one hand on your chest. And we're going to take a nice deep belly breath. A belly breath means that when you inhale, your belly will expand like a balloon. It's not just your stomach either, it's your whole stomach and your back. It will feel as if you have an inner tube around you. That whole area will expand while your chest and shoulders stay still. And as you exhale, your belly button will come back towards your spine. So it's inhale, exhale. Inhale, belly fills up. Exhale, all the air leaves and your belly comes back towards your back. Now we are going to pair that with voice. So I'm going to have everyone take a nice deep belly breath. Once you're nice and full, and I understand this is going very fast, if the breathing doesn't feel comfortable, don't think too hard about it. Trust me, you know how to breathe. You're not doing this wrong. We're going to take a nice deep breath, and once your belly is nice and full, we're going to do the loudest ah you can. So it'll sound like ah. Everyone together. Ah. I don't know if you're all on mute or if you're just not enjoying the exercise. I'm going to assume you're doing it. So take your time. If you want to unmute yourself for my benefit, much appreciated. Right, good. So the key with this, lovely, beautiful. The key with this is you want to make sure your throat feels relaxed. And I know I'm just skimming the surface of this. If you have more detailed questions, we can certainly talk about it. But doing just a really loud ah with your throat relaxed, letting your belly do the work, getting yourself, that helps get you set up for a healthy voice for the rest of the day, or for at least the rest of your meeting. The important thing being that you are speaking on the exhale, meaning you don't want to exhale first and then try to talk. You won't be able to do it very efficiently, but getting yourself comfortable with a really full, loud sound that is not loud in a way that connotes tension, a way that forces you to push or squeeze, in a way that is full and relaxed. That is going to offer a very simple, very quick warm-up. If we're quarantined by ourselves right now, you're not using your voice except for on your meeting. So if the first time you go to speak is on your morning meeting, your voice isn't going to sound as strong as it could if you just do a few of these ahs in the mirror, in the shower, whatever it is, while you're getting ready. I think someone typed a question, but I no longer see the chat. Here we go. Okay, So just a notification that time is running up, so that's fine. Let's talk about tongue twisters. Great way to warm up your articulators. Everyone say these with me. 11 benevolent elephants.
11
Elephants.
elephants.
Good. Unique New York.
Unique New York.
New York. Aluminum linoleum.
Aluminum linoleum.
Yeah.
Fish sauce shop.
It's sauce shop.
The last one is probably the trickiest. Fish sauce shop. Now the trick with tongue twisters, you want to practice saying them increasingly faster. So you're going to start really slow. Aluminum linoleum. And then challenge yourself to go a little bit faster and a little bit faster. Aluminum linoleum, aluminum linoleum, aluminum linoleum, until you can't get it wrong. But if you make a mistake at the faster speed, you need to slow it back down and keep doing it slowly until you can't get it wrong 10 times. Do it a little bit faster. And then once you can't get it wrong 10 times, a little bit faster, go even faster than that. If you practice things like tongue twisters, going very quickly, regular everyday speech and articulation will be a breeze by comparison. These are fun. They don't take a lot of time. They're short. You can memorize them. Again, do them while you're getting ready. Do them while you're cooking. Whatever it is, just trying to do these every day will help warm up your articulators so that you can speak nice and clearly, so that when you have poor audio feedback and all of these other things working against you, your quality of articulation doesn't have to suffer.
Fish sauce shop. Fish sauce shop.
Beautiful. And then last, before we open it up for questions, the most important thing, regardless in person or remote, connect with your why. This goes back to what I said in slide 1, reiterating it, because it is the most important thing. Nothing else matters unless you know why you're delivering your message, what value you are providing your listeners, why you are grateful to be delivering your message, and why everyone listening to you is lucky to be hearing what it is you have to say. One of the most helpful tools in alleviating public speaking anxiety is gratitude. If you go into your presentation thinking, oh my gosh, this is terrible, I can't believe I have to do this, you're going to feel anxious and you're not going to do well. But if you might do well. A lot of people feel really anxious and do well anyway, but haven't slept for 3 days before the presentation. So you want to get in the habit of feeling good about presenting. Key there, be grateful for the fact that you get to present. You have the opportunity to share something with an audience. You have the opportunity to spread your message. Just connecting with gratitude and really pinpointing the reasons why you are lucky to be presenting. Maybe you have a stellar idea you've just been waiting to share. Maybe what you're saying will really help someone else, or maybe it's just an opportunity for you to express yourself. Whatever it is, be very specific in cultivating gratitude for why you get to present, not why you have to present. Any questions, thoughts, concerns about anything that we talked about today?
You can raise your hand or just unmute and start talking. We're very, very interested in your questions.
Yes, and I know I went pretty quickly the last few slides.
Okay.
So.
Mark Bremer just posted a question. Tricia, when is it appropriate as the host meeting speaker to mute all attendees or allow all attendees to unmute?
Very good question. This is definitely situation specific. So whatever you do, I always advocate for transparency. Just as I mentioned in the beginning, hey, I'm not really comfortable doing slides. I didn't say that as an excuse to make myself feel better. That, oh gosh, if I mess up, now that it's to save time if I do have a question and having to avoid the disclaimer later. If it would feel rude to your attendees to just all of a sudden mute them, I would just say, hey everyone, I'm putting you all on mute. Doesn't mean I don't value your input, just means if you have a question, please type it in the chat. And then let them know if they have the option to unmute themselves. just as I did in the beginning, I said, if you have a question, I personally am not bothered if someone interrupts me and I have to switch gears. That's fine with me. But some people get really thrown off. So if you know you're the type of person that you just want to get through your presentation, save all questions for the end, tell them, I would prefer you not unmute yourselves until the end of the presentation. Either way, I don't think there's a hard and steady rule of when it's appropriate. It really depends on your ability to be transparent and communicate that message, because people will understand as long as you let them know your reasoning behind it.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? We're getting, let's see here. We've got a few more minutes. I'm looking at New York time. New York time is still 12:49.
I have a question.
Kelly.
I don't know, I'm sure it depends on the situation, but how do you feel about allowing or enabling them to join a meeting prior to the host joining, and when should you or should you not, or is that really important?
That's a good question. Also, is there the functionality to allow someone to join before the host?
Yes, there's a setting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine as long as you're not late as the host. If someone joins 10 minutes early, it would be unreasonable for them to expect that you as the host would be there already, as long as you show up at the time that you said that they would. However, again, personal choice. If it gives you anxiety to get the email that says so-and-so is in your waiting room, just so you know, if that email doesn't make you feel good and makes you think, oh gosh, I don't like that, or what are they thinking of me for not being as early as they are, then disable that function and set it up so that they can only join when you're ready. Again, they shouldn't take offense to that. If anything, on their end, it'll be, okay, I'll have to wait till it's closer to the time. But it's just like in person, if you were to go to an event, sometimes you're allowed in the presentation room before it's technically opened up or before the host arrives. We don't look down on the host when they're not there before us, but sometimes you have to wait in the waiting room, and that's okay. No one thinks poorly of that, provided the host is not late.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's take maybe two more questions, and then we just have a little bit of closing business. Anything else?
Trisha, I have a question. This is Pam. So what do you think about people kind of like putting like a screensaver up, like they can turn their videos off and on, especially when they're on Zoom, or either picking up their device and moving around? What do you think about that?
So the question is, what do I think about screensavers? I mean,
Well, no, well, you know, sometimes when you're on a Zoom meeting, some people, they will stop their video recording, so you can't see their face, and then you'll see a screensaver. When do you think that things like that are appropriate?
Good question. So that is, again, dependent on the situation. So in a situation like today, I'd say more than half of you didn't have your video on. It's fine. I saw your names. That's okay. I'm not personally offended. But like I mentioned, it was helpful for me to see Pamela nodding and smiling as I was going. That way I knew I wasn't talking to a box. And Miriam and a few of you that did offer that feedback. And again, just given the setup, I couldn't even see all of you that did have your videos on. It's not inappropriate to have the video off if, let's say, you know you've got a lot going on in the background, you don't really want to actively participate, you just want to hear what's going on. There's no requirement that you have to have the video on. What I would say, though, is if it's an important meeting, if it's something that matters to you in terms of fostering connection with the other people in the group, if it's a team building sort of thing, I would encourage you to turn your video on, because otherwise you're really lacking that sort of connection I feel more connected right now to the people whose faces I saw than to the people whose faces I didn't. And that's nothing personal, nothing against anyone who didn't have their video on. I join webinars all the time and don't turn my video on for various reasons. But keep that in mind. Say, what level of connection do I want to have to the speaker? And if you want to have that engagement, turn your video on. I also find, personally, when I have the video on, I'm more likely to be more present and attentive to the meeting, versus if I have it off, there's an excuse to be distracted. It's easier to start thinking about other things or focusing on other things. So if the content is really important to you and you want to be more present, do yourself a favor and turn your video on, because that will encourage you at a subconscious level to be more present and engaged.
And this is Miriam, may I add, at one point in the meeting, and I'm the host, I had to turn my video off because there was pounding at my front door. And fortunately, the delivery person for Amazon pounded on the door because it's raining outside, and there were 3 boxes that were starting to get soaked. So I went and hauled the boxes into the house and then came back on the video. So I think we need to trust the person who needs to turn her or his video off at a moment in time because of an interruption, a barking dog, a child, Amazon delivery, or any other reason. Sometimes when I'm taking a lot of notes, as I do, for example, if I'm an evaluator during one of our Toastmasters meetings, I turn my video off while I'm writing the notes so it doesn't look like I'm on my other devices.
That's a huge point. So I appreciate you mentioning that. That's not distracting to the speaker. We generally know if someone has been attentive and all of a sudden the video goes off, if there's something going on, that's fine. So what I was saying earlier about using a phrase to say, oh, hold on a second, it would have been inappropriate for Miriam to say, hold on, someone's at my door, because of the nature of this presentation. But if this were a meeting, more of a collaborative meeting, it would have been probably more appropriate for you to say something, Miriam, as opposed to just stopping your video, but you would have known that based on the scenario. So I just want to give the disclaimer for what I said before about sharing your relationship to distractions. That's only appropriate sometimes in a situation like this. That wouldn't be something you need to let people know about.
Good point. So one more question. Do we have one more question from our group that has been very attentive? We've had 11 participants. Only one has exited just recently. So any other questions here?
I have a question. This is Adrienne Green. My question is, this is the speech coaching. What about monotone people? How do you coach people that have a monotone?
Yeah, very good question. It's definitely something that I work with a lot of people on, and that really comes down to getting comfortable with vocal variety. So if you're constantly feeling monotone or getting feedback that you're monotone, it's because you're not using your voice in all the ways you have available to you. You're just using a fraction of your voice. And so it's a combination of the technicality of, okay, how do we raise the pitch here? How do we elongate the vowel here? How do we change the volume here? And then the comfort and with connecting to the emotions behind what you're saying. Sometimes we're monotone because we're bored. Sometimes we're not bored at all, but our tone will convey that we are because of the way we're speaking. So it's really a much longer discussion than I can answer right now, but it's a process that combines the technicalities of speech with the emotions behind what you're saying, connecting with your intuitive expressiveness. And a large part of it is feeling comfortable with that and getting out of the comfort of, well, this is safe and what I've done my whole life, to saying this will take my delivery to the next level.
And we have one more quick question. What is your strategy for avoiding filler words like
Okay, also another question that is difficult to answer in so little time, but what I will say, the number one thing is slow down. We tend to be all talking faster than we think we are. Slow down. When you want to say take that nice deep belly breath that we talked about, and be okay with the pause. Again, this is a combination of technicality of, okay, what do I do instead of the alongside working on developing the comfort with silence. Silence is uncomfortable in many cases. So a lot of time is often spent on being okay sitting in silence, bathe in that awkwardness, in the vulnerability of not talking for half a second instead of saying
Well,
So again, longer discussion, but that's.
let's thank Tricia for a brilliant
Thank you, Tricia.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Tricia.
Before we close, I just want to repeat for those who joined before I might have made this announcement. The Creative Coast is a nonprofit that for the past 20 years has been focused on catalyzing the creative, technology, and entrepreneurial community here in Savannah. During this current crisis, we are offering instructional workshops like this online and for free. I am about to put into the chat 3 URLs, the Georgia Speech Coaching for Tricia, and she's also all over social media, so please find her there as well. And the link to the creativecoast.org with a reminder to tune in this Thursday, same time, I believe, for Kate Lance, who is the Creative Coast Communications Director, on creating an online course on an app called Teachable. I think that's going to be very interesting. I believe I will log into that. And last but not least, I have the Toastmasters Club URL for those of you who would like to get rid of your ums and ahs and improve your speaking. We are also online using Zoom every Tuesday at 6:15. If you go to our website, you can register to be admitted to the meeting. So again, thank you all for participating and have a good rest of your day. I think you'll be inside largely because it's raining, but get some fresh air too. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you.